Hello everyone, thanks for tuning into this video. I'm very excited to talk to you guys about these books and share my 2 cents on them. I hope you find some of this information useful and end up picking a book or two in your reading list of the year. And in the end of this video, I'll suggest if I had to pick one book out of after this whole list, I'll suggest one book which I think everyone should read, and I'm sure you'll have a great time with it.
Medium mocha.
Thank you. Let's begin. The first book I read in 2024 was Principles by Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio, if you have never heard of him, he is the founder and co-chief investment officer of Bridgewater Associates. It's the biggest hedge fund management company in the world. In the book, he talks about his background, how he grew up, and divides the book into two parts: life principles and work principles. I really admire his clear, structured approach to life, and I found this book really honest, insightful, and an incredible window into his mind. Also, a side note, if you haven't come across it yet, one of the, if not the best YouTube video is on Ray Dalio's YouTube channel. It's called How the Economic Machine Works. I highly recommend checking it out. It's a perfect example of how Ray Dalio simplifies complex ideas into remarkable clarity. The second book in this list is Hiroshima by John Hersey. Hiroshima is a 1946 book that tells the story of 6 survivors of the atomic bomb which was dropped on Hiroshima. It's considered to be one of the earliest work of new journalism where storytelling techniques of fiction are adapted to non-fiction reporting. Few examples of these techniques in modern cinema are the movies like The Big Short or Social Network. This book shows a detailed account of those 6 survivors from the morning of the attack to the next 1 year and how their life changed basically. Throughout this book, their lives intertwine because they're going through similar experiences, but the book also does a great job in showing those experiences through different perspectives of the survivors. He describes the unimaginable aftermath of the bomb basically in great detail in the book. Eyewitnesses seeing melted eyeballs, people vaporizing on the spot, leaving only their shadows imprinted on the walls. It's a graphic and haunting read, but that's exactly what makes it so real as well. Beyond the devastation, the book also talks about a period of great resilience, how the Japanese people lifted themselves up from this dystopia and went on to build yet another great civilization. Originally, this book was meant to be published as articles in the New Yorker magazine across 4 different issues, but seeing the impact of the story and the importance of the topic, the editors of the New Yorker decided to publish it as a single edition of the New Yorker magazine on August 31st, 1946. The next book on the list is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. We have all heard a lot about this book, so I don't think I'll have anything novel to add. But one thing did get stuck with me while reading this book is how Marcus Aurelius drops a world of wisdom in just one line, and he has done that throughout this book. For example, the line, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." When we glance over this line, it might look like a regular line, but when you actually sit and think about it and give it a thought, then you really realize that how meaningful it really is. And again, this book is full of instances like these and thoughts like these, and it's known that people read it multiple times throughout their life, and I also hope to do so. And I'll be honest, since I do my reading the first thing in the morning, I often found myself dozing off while reading this book. So for that reason alone, I'll be picking it up in the future for sure. The fourth book on this list is No Rules Rules by Reed Hastings and Erin Meyer. Every now and then I come across a person or a company and I find it so fascinating that I often think that I wish there's a book about this person or the company, and No Rules Rules was one of those instances. I've always been interested in Netflix as a company, not just as a media giant, but also as a tech company. And for a long time, it was also a company where I wanted to work at least once in my life. After listening to Reed Hastings in multiple interviews and forums, I really wanted to know more about him and how he built Netflix. And this book is exactly that. The book covers Netflix's inception and how it developed one of the most unconventional slash interesting slash controversial work cultures out there. Reed Hastings basically threw away the playbook of how to build a tech company or a media company and basically reinvented workplace culture. The book explains how Netflix adopted these radical policies, and the co-author of the book, Erin Meyer, interviews throughout the book interviews past and present employees of Netflix and talks about how these policies change their lives. One of the example of these unconventional decisions is Netflix's unlimited vacation policy, something completely opposite to the corporate norm of fixed vacation days in a year. Netflix believes that instead of enforcing limits, they trust their employees to manage their time off responsibly, ensuring that their team's work is not disrupted. And surprisingly, it works. I've personally worked at a company where they had unlimited vacation policy, and I actually ended up taking less vacations as compared to the company where I had previously worked, where they had a fixed vacation policy. Because I just knew that I have that flexibility of taking off whenever I want, and I don't really have to count my days off. So I'm not surprised that at Netflix it works as well, and it's full of these examples where they have tried and tested how these conventional work policies actually works against retaining an employee. The next book on the list is Men's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. This is easily one of the most recommended books I've come across in the past few years. So this year I also had a chance to read it. Men's Search for Meaning is a 1946 book by the Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl, in which he shares his experiences as a prisoner in the Nazi concentration camps during World War II. He shares his psychotherapeutic approach, which focuses on finding meaning in life through three key ways, which he talks about in detail in the book. Frankl believed that a prisoner's ability to imagine a future with purpose directly impacted their chances of survival in a concentration camp. He observed that those who endured and survived the camps were often the ones who found a reason to keep going, even if only in their minds. In the second part of the book, he introduces logotherapy, his theory on meaning-driven psychotherapy, which has since led to establishment of multiple logotherapy institutes across the world. But at its core, this book is basically a journal of a daily life of a prisoner in the concentration camps. It really sends shivers across your body while reading it at multiple instances in the book. So I don't know, it's a pretty grim book. But if you are looking to explore more about this topic or more about this concept of logotherapy, you can look it up, and if you find it interesting, this book is definitely for that. The next book on the list is A Walk in the Woods by Bryson. This was hands down the most fun book I read last year. I laughed all the way through as two 40-year-old English amateur hikers set out to hike the 3,500-kilometer long Appalachian Trail, the longest walking trail in the world. Along the way, I not only enjoyed the misadventures they go through, but also got a deep dive into intricate details about the world's longest walking trail. Beyond the British banters and the hilarious take on the hiking culture, Bryson does an incredible job weaving in the trail's history, sociology, ecology, conservation status, and the stories of people he met on this journey. His descriptions are so vivid in the book that you can actually feel that what it must feel like sleeping in a real bed after sleeping in a tent for, 3 weeks or 4 weeks in a row, and what it does to your back, what it does to your imagination of comfort. The picture he paints of getting out of the woods and going into a lone motel in a remote town in Virginia, or make us understand how intense the feeling of an Oreo can be after spending 14 days alone in the woods just by yourself. At first, it seems like a funny story about two friends struggling through a hike, but you end up learning about this one tree disease which came from Asia at one point and wiped out 80% of population of chestnut trees in the US at one point. I cannot recommend this book enough if you love hiking or if you want to know more about it. And special shout out to my friend John, who back in June of last year, he took me out to Vermont where we did a small section of the Appalachian Trail. And reading this book before doing that hike made that experience even more special. The next book on the list is The White Tiger by Arvind Adiga. Anyone familiar with Bollywood movies would probably remember Ramin Baharani's 2021 crime thriller, The White Tiger. When I watched that movie, I had no idea about its source material, which is the 2008 novel by Arvind Adiga, which also won the Booker Prize that year. The film was widely acclaimed, and I always wanted to read the book, and last year I finally did. As expected, the book offers a much more deeper, more nuanced version of the story, as books usually do. It does an incredible job of taking the reader into the intricacies of the caste and the class discrimination in India, following the journey of a man from a very poor village in North India and him becoming an entrepreneur. But this book genuinely delves into a brutal and uncomfortable truth about the underprivileged side of Indian society, what the protagonist refers to as the darkness in the book. After finishing the book, I have rewatched the movie again just to see how the filmmakers made the decisions of what to keep and what not to keep. It's always interesting to see filmmakers make those hard decisions and how the end product actually turns out to be. If you haven't heard about the book or if you have only seen the movie, I highly recommend it. It's absolutely worth it. It's so well written. The next book on the list is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Although I love science fiction movies, I don't usually read science fiction books or even fiction books for that matter. But out of all the books Rohan Joshi recommended in his Chalchitra Talks episode, I decided to read this one and I had a great time with it. I know there's nothing new I can add about this book. Whatever there was to be said has been said in the past 46 years. It's just a very funny science fiction book, which is still highly quoted. And if you are feeling like reading some science fiction, definitely go for it. Let's move on to the next one. Cracking the PM Interview by Gail, Lachman, and McDowell. I know this book cannot be recommended to everyone, but it made it into the list out of necessity last year when I was applying for product tech roles across Canada. It's written by former product leaders at Microsoft and Google. It talks about the product management hiring process and discusses some very interesting case studies, like how many pizzas are delivered in Manhattan every day, or how do you design alarm clocks for blind people, or something like how do you launch a new rental service in India. So if you're interested in these guesstimates or case studies, and if you're interested in this field, and if you're preparing for similar interviews, then go for it. Okay, now let's get to the next one. The next one on the list is Awareness by Anthony D. Mello. A few of my books last year came through recommendations of Naval Ravikant. I think he's a very curious person, so his recommendations are always very interesting. And one of those recommendations was this book, Awareness. At its core, the book is exactly about that, awareness. And D. Mello talks a lot about this particular topic from different angles. D. Mello draws his thoughts from a mix of Christian spirituality, Buddhist parables, Hindu breathing exercises, and various psychological insights to deliver his message. I found him to be a very strange and unconventional spiritual writer, in my opinion. He has a lot of strong opinions about the modern world, which would often put you at crossroads with your own understanding. We are caught in this, what he calls a go, go, go world of illusion. And he suggests that we need to step back, become truly aware of everything around us, and prioritize what actually matters. And for that message alone, I think it was worth reading it, but I don't really feel like recommending it enough, because how I felt while reading it, that a spiritual writer usually has an open mind and usually welcomes other ideas. And looking at D. Mello's writing, he seemed very adamant about his ways of life, and that threw me off a little bit. Now let's move to the next one. The 11th book on the list is Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. I don't really remember how I came across this book, but I'm really glad I did. Small Things Like These is a historical novel published in November of 2021, and it won the Orwell Prize for Best Political Fiction in 2022. Out of all the books I read in 2024, I think this book had the best writing. The story follows a coal merchant in a small Irish village in 1985, seamlessly shifting from the everyday rhythm of the town to a deeply unsettling episode about the abusive Magdalene laundries. The Washington Post review of this book said, "Get 2 copies, one to keep, one to give." And that's exactly what you will feel like doing after reading this. I cannot recommend it enough. Also, there's a feature film adaptation based on this book featuring Cillian Murphy, and I'm sure they did a great job in the movie as well. The 12th book on the list is Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman by Richard Feynman. Some of my best discoveries of last year were the Richard Feynman books. Once again, thanks to Naval Ravikant's recommendations. I ended up reading 3 of them. And if you're not familiar with these books or Richard Feynman, this book is a great place to start with. I think we all have 2 sides, one which everyone else knows about, and one which very few people around us get to see. For many, Richard Feynman is this brilliant physicist who made groundbreaking discoveries in theoretical physics and quantum electrodynamics, and also won a Nobel Prize for it. And just like most other scientists we know of, that's where the story ends. But Feynman's books reveals how wildly curious he was, and how that curiosity led him to an extraordinary life. How he first got interested in science and the unexpected paths and interests he followed just because something fascinated him. He's also refreshingly very honest, where he talks openly about the moments where he was not the best person. And in this memoir covering his entire life, he only spends 2 or 3 pages talking about winning the Nobel Prize, where he chooses to talk about the politics behind seating arrangement at the Nobel Prize ceremony. I really enjoyed reading this book, and naturally, I followed by reading another book of Richard Feynman. So the next book is What Do You Care What People Think? Again by Richard Feynman. This book focuses on two deeply personal and significant experiences of Richard Feynman's life. The first part of the book is about Feynman's first wife, Arlene, and how they both navigated the difficult cards life dealt them. The second part shifts gears and talks in detail about Feynman's involvement in the Roger Commission, which investigated the 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. Feynman breaks down the intricate details of the investigation, talking about protocols followed, decision-making processes of NASA, and at times the dysfunction within NASA and other teams involved in this important mission. It's a book that talks about both intellect and emotions, giving us both a touching personal story and an inside look at one of the most significant space flight investigations in history. The 14th and second last book on the list is Six Essentials of Physics by Richard Feynman again. Between 1961 and 63, Richard Feynman delivered a series of lectures at Caltech that revolutionized the teaching of physics worldwide. These lectures were designed for undergraduate students, and while they are often said to be accessible to those without a deep background in physics, I wouldn't recommend this book just to anyone. That being said, Feynman's teaching style has a way of sparking curiosity in just about anyone. The last book I'm going to talk about today is Educated by Tara Westover, gifted by my dear friend Matias Jose Montero, aka Batista. I did not know anything about the book or the author going into it, but what an experience it was. It's very easy to read a book when it's written this well. I do think that an author's best work is often their first book. It's true in Arundhati Roy's Small Things Like These, or Aravind Adiga's The White Tiger, and in this instance, Tara Westover was educated as well. The book is a memoir discussing her upbringing in a survivalist Mormon family in a rural mountain town in Idaho, where the author goes through various stages of denial, religious beliefs and disbeliefs, abuse, and identifying herself while receiving traditional education, which she did not know anything about till she was 17. The book gets very uncomfortable at many stages, and you as a reader often get frustrated at the circumstances, but you can only sympathize. There's a lot to relate in this story if education has played an important part in shaping your life. It really made me reflect on how education can challenge even the most deeply held convictions of ours. And with that, the list comes to an end. Thank you so much again for sticking around. And as I mentioned in the beginning, if I have to recommend just one book out of these 15 books, I would love to recommend Surely You Are Joking, Mr. Feynman to everyone. I think we all can learn a lot from this person, and I was just amazed by where a person's life can go if he follows his curiosity. So yeah, I think everyone should read this book at least once in their life. So with that, this list comes to an end. Thank you so much for sticking around, and happy reading in 2025. Bye.